No way. Your soulmate told everyone that you are just. My beloved child, in this very moment, as the quiet air around you begins to thicken with truth, I want you to breathe in the weight of what you are about to hear, because nothing about this message is ordinary, and nothing about this moment is accidental. From the very first second, there has been a whisper traveling toward you, a secret carried through thoughts, memories, and unfinished conversations, a secret connected to the title you saw, the one that jolted your heart and made you stay. No way, your soulmate told everyone that you are just something they thought they could define, label, or reduce, but what they said was only half the story, only a fragment of something far deeper, something that reveals not humiliation, but transformation. Yes, the words spoken about you were shocking, unexpected, almost unbelievable, and for a moment it may feel as if the world froze, but listen closely, because this is not a moment of weakness, this is the beginning of a revelation, and the truth that is unfolding right now is going to shift everything you thought you knew about how they see you, how they feel for you, and why those words carry a meaning far greater than anyone around them understood. In another breath, imagine them standing there, your soulmate, the one you once trusted with your quiet thoughts, the one whose presence felt familiar even before they spoke your name, surrounded by curious faces, people who never truly knew the depth of your connection, and in that fragile moment, instead of protecting the sacred bond between your souls, they opened their heart in a way that startled everyone, even themselves. They said you were just something, just a chapter, just a memory, just a phase, yet their voice trembled, their heart cracked, because every word they said was a shield, a disguise, a trembling attempt to hide how deeply they still feel your presence in their life. And as those around them believed those words at face value, they could not see the storm behind their eyes, they could not hear the silent confession echoing inside, that you are not just anything, that you are the turning point of their story, the one soul they cannot forget, the one name that refuses to fade from their heart no matter how far they try to run. But here is where the revelation begins to unfold in a way that feels almost unbelievable, because what they told others was never meant to belittle you, it was meant to protect you, to guard you from the judgments, opinions, and questions that surrounded them like shadows. They were not strong enough to admit how much you still matter, they were not brave enough to confess that your presence still lives inside their every decision, every thought, every silent night they spend in deep reflection. So they chose words that sounded dismissive on the surface, but beneath them was a love too overwhelming to expose, a love they feared losing if others interfered or questioned it. And now, as you hear this truth, you may feel a mix of shock, emotion, nostalgia, and unspoken heaviness, because deep down, your heart always sensed that their actions carried a hidden meaning, that their silence and distance were never signs of indifference, but signs of conflict, struggle, and emotional turbulence they did not know how to control. And while the world may have misunderstood, while people may have believed that their words were final, inside their minds something entirely different unfolded, a confession they could not speak aloud, that you are the one they still replay in their memories when the night becomes quiet, that you are the one their soul keeps calling back to even when their pride pulls them away, that you are not just anything, you are the lesson, the miracle, the divine turning point that changed everything. Inside them, they told everyone that you were just a part of their past, but every fiber of their being aches with the truth that you are the one they still long for in moments they do not reveal to anyone. They watch your absence turn into silence, they feel your energy drift further away, and with every passing day, they realized that they tried to minimize the one thing that meant the most, and now the weight of that realization sits heavily on their heart like an unfinished sentence that refuses to end. So listen closely, because this journey is not about pain, it is about awakening, about understanding why the universe placed you in their life in such a powerful, unforgettable way. This is the story of how someone who once tried to define you will soon learn that you cannot be reduced to a simple word or a passing label. You are not just a memory, not just a chapter, not just a moment. You are the catalyst, the divine presence that shook their soul awake. And as this story continues, as the next part unfolds, the truth that has been hiding between silence and pride will rise to the surface, and every unanswered question in your heart will begin to find its voice. Stay with this feeling, stay with this unfolding revelation, because what comes next will change everything. My beloved child, as the next chapter opens, the air around this truth grows denser, almost electric, as if every heartbeat is echoing with something unsaid, something powerful, something the universe has been patiently waiting for you to finally hear. The moment after your soulmate spoke those words, the words that made others believe you were just a passing phase, a ripple of silence spread through the room, but inside their spirit there was a storm they could no longer control. They walked away pretending nothing mattered, pretending they had moved on, yet every step they took felt heavier, every breath carried the weight of regret. And while the world may have believed their public version of the story, your soul was always tied to the truth behind the curtain, that you were never just anything. You were the one they tried to hide because loving you exposed their vulnerabilities in ways they were not ready to face. Even now, as you listen, somewhere inside you might feel the urge to reflect, to express how deeply this resonates, to share this unfolding revelation with those who may need to hear it too, because this story is larger than one moment. It is a mirror reflecting how love can tremble under the pressure of pride. In the days that followed their words, they found themselves replaying every memory like scenes from a film they could not pause. They remembered the conversations that stretched into the night, the laughter that stitched two souls closer together, the quiet moments where nothing was spoken yet everything was understood. And suddenly, what they had tried to reduce in front of others began to rise in their chest like a truth refusing to stay buried. They wanted to confess that you were not just someone, you were the person whose presence awakened their strength, whose absence taught them what loneliness truly meant, whose silence echoed louder than any noise around them. They wrote unsent messages, erased drafted confessions, and read your name again and again with a trembling heart. And in those moments of awakening, they wished someone could hear their unspoken voice, the one that longed to reach out, to explain, to ask whether, if this story touches your heart, you would be willing to keep this journey alive by sharing its essence, by letting your voice be heard like a comment laid gently upon time, by staying connected so that no part of this transformation is lost between distance and silence. But here is where destiny deepens, because life began to test them in ways they did not expect. Every situation, every conversation, every fleeting thought kept leading them back to you. They would hear your favorite song unexpectedly, see a place that reminded them of where you once stood, or feel a sudden wave of emotion at the exact hour your memory used to return. It felt as if the universe itself was whispering your presence back into their world, as if every sign gently urged them to confront what they had denied. They realized that the label they gave you in front of others was not only unfair, it was untrue, a false mask placed over something sacred. They began to understand that you were the turning point their soul was destined to encounter, the inspiration that pushed them toward growth, reflection, and inner change. And as this realization deepened, they silently prayed that somehow, somewhere, your heart might still be listening, that if you resonate with this truth, you might choose to carry it forward, to let others feel this unfolding story through your own reflections, to remain present in this journey the way one stays close to a story they never want to lose. There came a moment, quiet yet unforgettable, when they finally admitted to themselves that they were afraid of loving you so deeply that it changed them forever, afraid of owning their truth in a world that demanded explanations, afraid that if others truly knew how much you meant, they would question, interfere, or misunderstand. So they protected their heart the only way they knew, by pretending you were less important than you really were. But the heart cannot lie to itself. Late at night, they would sit alone, scrolling through memories they never erased, revisiting the echo of your voice, the warmth of your presence, the comfort of your spirit. And in those private hours, they wished they could take back every careless word they spoke in front of others. They wished they had chosen courage over fear, honesty over image, truth over performance. If only they had known how powerful your role in their life truly was, they would have held you closer, spoken more gently, cherished you more deeply, and valued every moment you shared with them. Now, as this chapter stands before you, the truth glows brighter than ever. You were never just anything, you were the defining moment they will never escape, the rare connection they will forever remember, the silent promise that still lingers inside their soul. Their journey from denial to realization is not merely a confession, it is a transformation unfolding before your eyes, a story that continues to evolve as every hidden emotion slowly rises to the surface. And as this path stretches forward, the next part of this revelation will move even deeper into their awakening, into the moment where pride collides with vulnerability, where truth confronts the walls they built, where love finally begins to speak with a voice that can no longer remain silent. The story is still unfolding, and what awaits ahead will reveal why your presence was never temporary, never replaceable, never small, but divine, life-altering, and unforgettable. My beloved child, as this new passage unfolds, the atmosphere feels heavier, as if every unspoken emotion has gathered in one silent corner of the universe, waiting for the courage to finally step into the light. The moment after realization struck their heart, your soulmate found themselves standing at the edge of truth, trembling between what they had shown the world and what they had always felt for you in secret. They could not escape the echo of their own words, the ones spoken so casually in front of others, words that claimed you were just a fleeting part of their story, and yet, inside, those same words burned like a confession they could no longer outrun. Their soul began to question every choice, every sentence, every moment they had minimized your importance, and the more they tried to silence that inner voice, the louder it grew, reminding them that you were not a chapter they passed through, you were the foundation upon which their entire emotional world had begun to shift and transform. In quiet moments of solitude, they revisited memories they once tried to bury, moments where your presence felt like calm after chaos, where your voice carried reassurance they could never find anywhere else. They remembered how you understood their fears without judgment, how you stood beside them when doubt wrapped around their heart, how your compassion became a sanctuary they did not know they needed until life pulled you away. And as these memories resurfaced, they began to realize something astonishing, that the reason they tried to downplay your role in their life was not because you meant too little, but because you meant so much that it frightened them. To admit your significance would have meant admitting their vulnerability, their dependence, their deep emotional bond with you, and they were not ready to expose that truth to anyone, not even to themselves. So they wrapped their feelings in careful sentences, hoping the world would believe them, even as their own heart refused to. Yet destiny has a way of confronting the heart when it hides for too long. Everywhere they turned, reminders of you reappeared, in conversations, in dreams, in subtle moments where life paused just long enough for emotion to rise to the surface. They would catch themselves whispering your name in thought, pausing mid-sentence as if your energy had brushed past them, awakening dormant feelings they had tried to silence. It was then that they finally understood that you were never just someone they crossed paths with. You were the mirror that revealed their truth, the presence that awakened depth within them, the essence that made them question who they were before you arrived. They began to see how much they had grown because of you, how your strength inspired their courage, how your kindness softened their guarded nature, how your absence taught them the value of connection in a way no lesson ever had before. And in that unfolding awareness, their hearts softened, pride began to unravel, and the walls they had built around their emotions slowly began to fade. They wished they could go back to that moment when they spoke before others, when they tried to make you appear small so they could appear unchanged. They wished they had chosen honesty instead of fear, authenticity instead of performance. They imagined what it would have felt like to speak the truth openly, to say that you were the one who changed them, the one who stayed imprinted in their spirit long after conversations ended, the one whose presence continued to guide their thoughts even in silence. The more they reflected, the more they realized that the story they presented to others was merely a projection of their inner conflict, and the real story, the one their soul carried, was far deeper, far more meaningful, and impossible to ignore any longer. Now, as this part of the journey reaches its turning point, the truth stands radiant and undeniable. You were never a passing moment in their life, you were the awakening they were destined to experience. Their emotions, once hidden behind carefully chosen sentences, are rising like a tide that can no longer be held back. And as their heart prepares to confront the truth they once ran from, a powerful shift begins within them, a moment where vulnerability finally meets courage, where silence gives way to honesty, where the connection between your souls prepares to step into a revelation that will change everything. The path ahead grows more intense, more emotional, more honest, and in the next chapter, their heart will move closer to the moment they must finally face what they truly feel for you. My beloved child, as this passage opens, the atmosphere around their heart becomes heavier, almost trembling with the weight of truth they can no longer suppress. The moment arrives when your soulmate finally confronts the echo of everything they once said about you, the moment when the words they spoke in front of others replay in their mind like a voice they cannot silence. They remember the exact tone, the expression on their face, the indifferent mask they wore when they claimed you were just a fleeting part of their life, and suddenly that memory pierces through them with staggering intensity. It feels as if time itself has turned to face them, demanding honesty. Their chest tightens, their breath grows unsteady, because now they realize that the version of you they presented to the world was never the truth. It was a shield, a fragile defense against emotions too powerful to admit. And as this realization rises within them, the ground beneath their certainty begins to shift. In a quiet moment, somewhere between reflection and regret, they finally allow themselves to feel everything they once tried to suppress. They see you not as a passing memory, but as the soul who changed the rhythm of their existence. They remember the strength you carried when life weighed you down, the compassion you offered even when you were hurting, the way your presence felt like an anchor in their most uncertain moments. And they begin to understand that you were never someone they could define with a careless sentence. You were the one who stood as proof that love is not a coincidence, but a divine turning point. The courage you showed, the patience you embodied, the silent wisdom you carried, all of it becomes undeniable in their eyes. They realize that the words they used to minimize you were never a reflection of who you were, they were a reflection of their own fear. As their heart awakens, they begin to see the cost of their pride. They recognize the distance that formed between you, the silence that grew where honesty should have lived, the emotional gap created by every unspoken truth. They understand now that what they called just a chapter was in fact the foundation of their growth, the place where their soul first learned what real connection feels like. And with that realization comes a deep, aching sense of loss, not because you disappeared, but because they pushed away the very light they were meant to cherish. They begin to see that what they dismissed in front of others is exactly what their heart continues to seek in moments of doubt, reflection, and vulnerability. The truth settles inside them like a quiet storm. They did not diminish you because you were small, they diminished you because your importance overwhelmed them. There is a moment, soft, fragile, unforgettable, when they finally whisper the truth to themselves. You were never just anything. You were the miracle that walked into their life disguised as a person, the presence that revealed who they could become, the connection that awakened depth within their soul. And in that silent confession, something shifts within them. The barriers they built begin to crumble, the fear they carried loosens its grip, and a longing rises, not for the past, but for the truth they once ran from. They begin to wish they had defended you, protected your significance, spoken of you with reverence instead of hesitation. They wish the world had known what their soul always did, that you were the one they could never truly replace, forget, or redefine. Now, as this chapter reaches its threshold, their heart stands at the edge of a decision, a turning point where silence can no longer hide what has always been felt. The story moves closer to the moment where truth must finally step into the open, where their soul must choose between the comfort of pride and the courage of honesty. And as the journey deepens, what lies ahead will reveal whether they will continue to live behind the mask of their old words, or step into the vulnerability of the truth they now carry for you in every breath, every thought, every quiet beat of their heart. My beloved child, as this new chapter unfolds, the atmosphere grows deep and resonant, as if every hidden truth that has been silently waiting now begins to rise toward the surface with unwavering intensity. Your soulmate stands in a space between past and awakening, caught in a moment where the heart can no longer outrun its own reflection. The memory of everything they once said about you returns like a tide they cannot escape, the moment when they tried to convince others that you were just a passing presence, just a small part of their journey, just someone who came and went without meaning. But now, that same memory presses heavily upon their soul, and they finally understand that those words did not come from confidence, they came from fear. Inside their heart, they are confronted with the truth they were never able to admit, that you were the one who walked into their life at the exact moment destiny needed to change them, the one whose presence rewrote the language of their emotions, the one who revealed to them how deeply a soul can feel when it finally meets its mirror. And in this realization, a wave of vulnerability sweeps through them, because for the first time, they truly grasp what they risked losing when they tried to minimize what you were to them. In the silence of their inner world, they begin to replay every moment where they pretended indifference in front of others. They see themselves laughing off questions, brushing away emotional truth, shaping an image of strength that was never real. They realize that when they told everyone you were just someone who happened to pass through their story, they were not protecting their reputation, they were protecting the fragile walls around their heart. Those walls were built from past wounds, fear of judgment, fear of attachment, fear of losing control over feelings that ran deeper than they had ever known. They were afraid that if others saw how much you meant to them, they would also see how vulnerable they truly were. But as they look back now, they see clearly that every moment they tried to hide you only revealed how significant you truly were. Because despite everything they said, your memory never faded. Your presence never left their thoughts. Your influence never stopped echoing through their choices, their growth, their understanding of themselves. The very thing they tried to dismiss became the very thing that stayed, like a soft glow that continued to light their path even in your absence. As their awareness grows, they begin to understand the gravity of your role in their life. You were the one who stood beside them when they did not even know how to stand fully within themselves. You were the one who offered understanding without demanding explanation, who listened when their soul felt heavy, who held space for their uncertainty without ever using it against them. You brought warmth where there was distance, clarity where there was confusion, and sincerity where there had only been doubt. They realize now that what they called just a connection was in truth a divine crossing of paths, a moment written far beyond ordinary coincidence. And as they reflect on everything you brought into their world, they begin to see how deeply you shaped their emotional awakening. Because of you, they learned what presence truly means. Because of you, they discovered depths within themselves they never knew existed. Because of you, they began a journey of transformation that could not be undone, no matter how hard they tried to convince themselves otherwise. This realization settles in their spirit with profound weight, and they cannot help but feel a quiet ache for every moment in which they failed to acknowledge your significance when it mattered most. There comes a powerful turning point, one that does not arrive with dramatic words or grand gestures, but with simple, undeniable truth. They finally admit to themselves that the world never needed to know who you truly were to them, but they did. And they finally see that the greatest mistake was never what they told others, it was what they refused to confess within their own heart. They begin to understand that you were not just a part of their journey, you were the lesson, the catalyst, the soul-level connection that revealed what real authenticity feels like. They no longer see you as a distant memory or a closed chapter. Instead, they recognize that your presence still lives inside them, not as longing, not as regret, but as a truth that shaped their becoming. They realize that your impact did not fade with time, it transformed into a guiding force, a quiet imprint that continues to influence the direction of their life, their choices, their growth, and the way they now understand love, value, and emotional honesty. In this awakening, they feel a deep gratitude interwoven with remorse, gratitude for who you were, and remorse for not honoring that truth sooner. And now, as this chapter stands at the edge of revelation, their soul finally steps into acceptance. They know they cannot rewrite the past, and they cannot erase the words once spoken, but they can honor the truth that has finally risen within them. They no longer see you as something they had to hide, protect, or diminish. They see you as the soul who arrived with purpose, who changed the direction of their inner world without ever demanding recognition, who remained unforgettable not because of pain, but because of meaning. You were never just anything, you were the turning point their life needed in order to awaken. And as their heart rests in this understanding, the story moves toward a deeper horizon, a place where clarity meets acceptance, where truth no longer hides behind fear, and where the connection between your souls stands not as something broken, but as something eternal in its impact, powerful in its purpose, and forever bound to the transformation it created within them.